The date is November 8th, 2004, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. It seemed like any other ordinary Monday, but this time, things were different. An excitement filled the air, your toes tapping in rhythm, your fingers fidgeting with your mechanical pencil. What could it be that has you so charged up? You've just finished your homework, you've cleaned your room, and all of a sudden, you hear the familiar sound of your razor phone vibrating on the dresser. You walk over and answer the call.
Hello?
Bro, are you ready yet? My mom's letting me take the car tonight. We don't want to be late. The line's gonna be insanely long.
Yeah, I'm ready. I've just gotta let my parents know I'm leaving. But would you mind grabbing me a drink on the way over? There's nothing but water in my fridge.
Oh yeah, buddy. I've already got a 12-pack with our name on it.
Sweet, man. I'll see you soon.
You walk into your parents' room to tell them your friend is on his way to pick you up. And after a bit of explanation on where you're going to be so late at night, they tell you to be safe and send you on your way. Like clockwork, you step out of the front door, only to be met with your friend slowly pulling into the driveway. One of your buddies hops out of the back seat, waving around a half-empty can of Mountain Dew.
You get middle seat, ass face. I already called window.
You let out a half-comical sigh and make your way into the back seat. Your friend to the left of you is nursing the entire 12-pack of soda that was discussed on the phone, and with an overly excited grin on his face, he hands you a drink and tells you to get ready for the ride of your life. Your friend in the driver's seat nods his head in approval, turns up the music, and speedily makes his way to your destination. The cool November air, the sounds of laughter and conversation, the copious amounts of sugar and caffeine coursing through your veins. It was a thing of beauty. But what about this night was so special? Well, for what would have been just another ordinary Monday, actually came to be one of the biggest events in gaming history. That was the Halo 2 midnight release. Now, this is where we're going to come back to reality, as I understand that some people watching this may have been too young to ever get a chance to attend one of these events. Hell, you might not even know what I'm talking about. You see, before we had access to a wide range of downloadable products on console, such as we have now with the PlayStation Store and Xbox Live, we used to have to buy our games in physical form, pretty much exclusively. Now I get that physical games still exist in present day, but the sight of them is becoming more and more rare, and I honestly believe it could even become a foreign practice at some point soon. But back then, we really had no choice other than to go to a store for our games, which led to one of the most exciting events in gaming to be spawned. And it's the very subject of this video. So if you were too young to attend a midnight release or even possibly never had the chance to go to one, I'm here to give you a look into what it was like to experience one of these magical nights, and hopefully we can stir up some of those incredible emotions that were once found in this beloved tradition. While the history of midnight releases are a bit vague, from what I can gather in my research, the earliest and most well-documented midnight launch was that of the Sega Dreamcast on September 9th, 1999. The launch took place at multiple retail chains such as Software Etc. and Babbage's, which, if you remember those stores, we're getting pretty old, dude. But anyways, the whole idea of these things were for gamers to get their hands on the newest products as soon as physically possible, at midnight on release day, which meant showing up to a participating store of your choice, standing in line, and staring awkwardly at the back of a stranger's neck for hours upon end. Well, at least that's what you would think was in store for these types of functions. But on the contrary, they were actually insanely fun. But to be fair, the Dreamcast launch was quite a spectacle, and while many media outlets painted it as chaotic or stressful, I was able to dig up a few forum posts from people who actually attended the Dreamcast launch. Let's see what they had to say. I worked it at Electronics Boutique, probably the best console launch lineup ever, said Extra Big Ass Fries. I skipped school that day, was in high school. This girl who had a crush on me wanted to come hang out because she heard I was skipping. Thinking we'd be smoking weed or some other cool 90s stunts, we went to the mall and to Babbage's to pick up my Dreamcast, and just played Sonic Adventure most of the day at my house. She was pretty upset for most of the day. I still have my launch console and the handwritten receipts for some reason. Says Snow Use. I'll never forget 9999. Walked to the mall after class and picked it up from Software Etc. I only had enough cash for the system, controllers, and Soul Calibur, but once I walked back to the dorm and hooked it up, I was in gaming heaven. Had my friends over to play, my roommates played, Randoms even showed up to play. It was incredible. I didn't even take the Soul Calibur disc out of my Dreamcast until Crazy Taxi was released by Jimmy Power Gamer. I remember working my ass off all summer long. I saved up $700 and I went nuts at the midnight launch of software, etc. It was the night before my first day of my senior year of high school, and I was wrecked because I stayed up all night playing Soul Calibur. My favorite system in many ways. I still have mine connected. Now see, I just love little stories like this, as they really encapsulate that excitement that comes with a midnight release. But anywho, back to the San Jose launch. It was reported that up to 1,000 people showed face at the launch, all in hopes of getting their sweaty hands on the next big thing for gaming in the late 90s. San Jose was actually having horrible weather the night of this launch, with the majority of customers getting stuck out in the pouring rain and lightning while they waited. But if you know anything about the spirit of a true gamer with a goal in mind, you know they weren't going anywhere. The event even had Vern Troyer of Austin Powers, as well as Donna D'Errico of Baywatch in attendance, to sign autographs for awaiting patrons. But despite the Dreamcast selling 98.4 million on its launch day, it just couldn't keep up with the fierce competition that Sony was planning to send its way just a few months later. And while the Dreamcast was an incredible piece of tech and the earliest documented system I can find info on for midnight release, I would argue to say that our next subject was by far one of the most prolific and beautifully captured launches to ever exist. So let's take a journey to a little over 13 months later, to the release of the Sony PlayStation 2. But you better prepare yourself, as it's incredibly nostalgic. The date was October 26th in the year 2000, a night in which the most successfully sold console of all time was released. Now as you can see, this was a huge deal for many gamers at the time, and the planned release for this console was done on a much larger scale than ever before. The PlayStation 2 had sold a whopping $250 million on its first day of release, as these events were spreading like wildfire throughout the US. So much so that many different news outlets across the country were quick to cover the massive amounts of people that were showing up to wait in line for these things. I mean, grown men, kids with their parents, even kittens, you name it. They were all here to get their hands on a PS2. And I don't know if it's just me, but the genuine excitement that radiates from these people in these videos is just so wholesome. I mean, the PlayStation 2 was such an incredible console, and personally is my favorite of all time. And while I didn't receive my first PS2 until around 2001 when I was still in grade school, I still find myself revisiting videos of this launch quite often, as I can only imagine how great it was. Which, by the way, if you're watching this and you were at the launch of the PS2, please leave a comment below. I would love to hear your stories. Anywho, these are some of the big dogs that come to mind in terms of early console releases. But what about games? Well, it's funny we bring that up, because there was one certain game that actually sold 11.2 million copies on the day of its release, which cashed out at about 815.7 million in generated revenue. And this is a game you're certain to remember, as it's still played in present day. That game being Grand Theft Auto 5. September 16, 2013, hordes of Grand Theft Auto fans lined up outside the game store in Stratford, London, pre-order tickets in hand, patiently waiting for that first-class ticket back to Los Santos. Over 1,000 people were present at this launch, taking the staff almost 3.5 hours to hand out all the copies. Which, when you think about it, that cashier had to be cooking. And this is only one example of thousands of other midnight launch parties going down all across the globe at this time. Even famed YouTubers such as Jay Stu and iJustine also popped out to take part in the event and filmed a video of their own experiences. But I'm not just here to regurgitate information on the most successful midnight launches. What we're really here to talk about is what made these events so special, and why it's a bit of a tragedy that it's becoming a lost art. You see, back in the more primitive years of gaming, at least primitive compared to today's standards, information about upcoming releases were nowhere near as available as they are today. While in present day, we can pretty much just hop on multiple social media platforms or watch YouTube to gain any info we need on upcoming games. But back in the late 90s to early 2000s, we pretty much solely relied on video game magazines, because a high-speed internet connection and a computer at that time was considered a bit of a treasure for most young gamers. Now, the magazines were much more accessible and would usually come with cool little extras such as posters or demo disc. Anyways, with this being the primary source of information, it kind of built a mystique around whatever game you were looking forward to releasing. kind of leaving things up to your imagination as to how this game will turn out, which in turn built up copious amounts of hype surrounding a release. With a limited selection of media covering most new games and consoles, it made people much more curious and in demand for said products, making these midnight launches much more of a celebration than the ones we've seen in recent years. The majority, if not all of the people who came to a midnight release had been waiting on this game for months or even longer, so you can imagine how much excitement these people were feeling in this moment. After all this time saving magazine articles, scouring the limited press found online, or maybe even watching X-Play, that limited amount of info and coverage just made any release that much more epic. Because sometimes, less is more. Now taking that information into account, you can see why somebody would be excited enough to stand outside for hours after they've been getting blueballed by Game Informer for who knows how long. But in my personal experience, another one of my favorite things about attending a midnight release is the preparation. Now I've attended quite a few in my time as a youth. From World of Warcraft expansions, Call of Duties, to GTA 4, I've been around the block more than just a couple of times. Quite literally, those lines get long. But it was all of the hype leading up to the night of release that curated some of my finest gaming memories. To setting up multiple computers or systems in my bedroom for an after-launch LAN party, to stocking up on snacks and highly caffeinated beverages to keep our eyelids sewn to the screen. The preparation was part of what made this tradition for me and my friends so special. It was a celebration of life, of youth, of a time when all that mattered was reaching prestige rank before anyone else at your school. But these events weren't all just about the hype. As we mentioned before, depending on whatever launch you may have attended, some of them would include celebrity guests, musical artists, or even a couple of crazed fans that were looking to show off their cosplay creations. But even at the more humble release locations, it was just a damn good time getting to socialize with everyone around you. Now sometimes gamers are stereotypically viewed as awkward and reclusive, not really the talkative bunch, but even if that weren't a bullshit statement, which it is, everyone at a launch is there for the same thing, so you already know that you have something in common with almost everyone in that line, which really made for some great laughs and new friends to be made. You'd exchange gamer tags, maybe one of your new friend's buddies would make a Taco Bell run and bring you back some food. It really added to the excitement that was felt between everyone there, and was overall just a lot of fun. Some people would even bring their TVs and game consoles while they waited, and I'll tell you right now, there's nothing like a little Mario Kart to pass the time. But for me personally, nothing could ever compare to how much excitement was felt in that last hour of waiting. It was almost like a surreal thing, especially at the GTA 4 launch. Like I just remember reading up on everything about that game for well over a year before it was released, and it almost felt like it was a dream when it came down to actually walking up and grabbing my copy. The countdown began, and everyone just begins to chant in excitement for the clock to strike 12. And you would think it would just be a chaotic stampede of people rushing through the door, hasty to get their copy, but much unlike a crowd of people surrounding a stack of $12.99 toaster ovens on Black Friday, the crowd at a midnight launch is typically quite pleasant. The stores will usually have a system in play to speed the lines along, as some of these releases can see thousands of patrons. One by one, you'll approach the cashier with your pre-order ticket, walk over to the person who rings you out, and then lastly, you get your game. And man, I remember cradling my copy of Modern Warfare 3 like Barry Sanders against the Buccaneers in '94. It was such a simple state of bliss to be walking out of that store after you not only waited months in advance, but stood outside for hours and wait. But now came the time, the moment you were really waiting for. You usually stop off at McDonald's, Sonic, or whatever else was open at that hour, purchase a massive sodium-infested meal for yourself, and then get ready for some serious gaming. My parents were usually cool enough to let me stay home the day after most of these launches, on account of me keeping my grades up. I photoshopped my report cards. But it was awesome. You would just get home, put in your new game, load it up, and everyone in the lobby had just gotten back from a midnight launch as well. So everyone's either delirious, 4 energy drinks deep, or just absolutely out of their mind with excitement at this time, which I always thought was so fun. It was almost like being a part of a little club. You're up playing the latest release in gaming, while the world peacefully sleeps. It was just a really cool feeling, man. I don't know how to explain it. But anyhow, I thought I would make a video covering this, as I know it's pretty much a non-existent thing at this point. With the convenience of digital downloads and the scarce number of physical copies being put on the shelves, the practice of a midnight release is sadly becoming extinct in the wake of present-day gaming. So for those who have never experienced one before, I hope I've been able to give you a little insight on how fun they were. And if you have been to one, please, feel free to drop your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Anyways, that's all for this video, but I just want to take this time to thank you all so much for my newest subscribers and for everybody who's been showing love on my last video. The response was absolutely insane, and I can't wait to show you all what I have in store for the future. But until next time, please take care, and I hope to see you in the next video. Peace out.
Heaven sent.